My mother looked me dead in the eyes across her own kitchen table and said, "We're not investing in a dead end." I was 26 years old. I had just asked, quietly and carefully, if they might help me the way they were helping my sister. Not the same amount. Not even half. Just something. The answer was no. The reason was me. My name is Sophia. I'm 35 now. I'm a landscape architect and land developer based in central Tennessee, and I am going to tell you the story of how being called an embarrassment by my own parents became the foundation of everything I have today. Literally, growing up in a well-off suburb of Nashville, our household operated on a single unspoken currency: prestige. My father, Gerald, was a corporate attorney. My mother, Patricia, chaired the local arts council, hosted fundraisers, and kept a mental ledger of every neighbor's career, address, and educational pedigree. Appearances were not just important in our home. They were the entire point of the home. I was the older daughter by 4 years. My sister, Camille, arrived like a gift my parents had been waiting for their whole lives. Where I was loud and outdoors and covered in mud by noon, Camille was poised, bookish, and deeply invested in the things our parents valued. By middle school, the dynamic was so settled that it barely needed enforcing anymore. Camille was the plan. I was the complication. It wasn't that I was a troubled child. I made decent grades. I never got into serious trouble. But I had zero interest in the trajectory my parents had mapped out. Law, medicine, finance. Something with a title that fit cleanly on a country club conversation. My passion, from the time I was 8 years old, was the land itself, the way a slope drained, the way native plants came back after a hard winter, the way you could take a neglected piece of earth and coax something extraordinary out of it. My grandfather, my mother's father, was the one who saw it. He had 2 acres behind his farmhouse in rural Kentucky that he let me treat like my personal laboratory every summer. By age 11, I had built a small rain garden that actually redirected runoff away from his basement. By 13, I had replanted his entire back hillside with a mix of clover, fescue, and wildflowers that stopped the erosion he'd been fighting for years. Grandpa Ray would stand at the edge of it with his coffee and shake his head. "That girl has a gift," he'd tell anyone who visited. My parents called it a hobby. In high school, I joined the Environmental Science Club, volunteered with a local land trust, and spent 2 summers interning with a small landscape design firm run by a woman named Donna Kessler, who would later become one of the most important mentors of my life. I came home from that second summer with a binder full of design sketches, client feedback forms, and a letter from Donna saying I had genuine professional instincts. I set it on the kitchen counter where my father would see it. He moved it to make room for his briefcase, and never mentioned it. When college applications came around, I was clear about what I wanted. The landscape architecture program at the University of Tennessee was excellent, accredited, and came with strong industry placement. I got in. I was genuinely proud. My mother sat me down the week I received the acceptance letter. "Landscape architecture," she said, with the patient tone of someone explaining bad news to a child. "Sophia, that's glorified gardening. Do you understand what the earning potential looks like?" My father didn't even sit down for the conversation. He stood in the doorway with his jacket still on, like he might leave at any moment. "If you want to study something outdoors, study environmental law. At least there's a career attached to it." I went to Tennessee anyway. I paid for it with scholarships, a campus job in the university greenhouse, and a second job waitressing 3 nights a week. My parents contributed nothing toward my education. Not $1. Camille, 3 years behind me, was accepted to Vanderbilt on a partial scholarship. My parents covered the rest without hesitation. Tuition, housing, a laptop, a monthly allowance so she wouldn't have to work. They wanted her focused. I focused too. I just also worked 30 hours a week to survive. My undergraduate years were the first time I truly understood what I was capable of when no one was second-guessing me. My professors pushed me hard. Dr. Angela Merritt, who ran our planting design studio, told me in my junior year that I had one of the sharpest eyes for site ecology she had seen in 20 years of teaching. I absorbed everything: grading and drainage, hardscape installation, native habitat restoration, the business of bidding and project management. I stayed late in the studio, often until midnight, not because I had to, but because I genuinely could not stop. I graduated with honors. My parents came to the ceremony. They left immediately after for a dinner party and did not ask to see my portfolio. My first real job was with a mid-size landscaping and design firm in Nashville called Trowel and Stone. It was unglamorous in the beginning. Maintenance contracts, commercial planting installs, the occasional residential consultation. But I was learning the industry from the ground up, which turned out to be exactly the right foundation for what came later. Camille, meanwhile, graduated from Vanderbilt with a business degree, and walked into a junior analyst position at a regional investment firm, largely through a connection my father had cultivated over 20 years of corporate law. Her starting salary was nearly double mine. My parents were ecstatic. They threw a dinner party. I found out about it afterward. I stayed in my lane. I kept my head down. By 24, I had worked my way up to project lead at Trowell & Stone, managing full design build contracts for residential and small commercial clients. I had also started doing something on the side that my employer didn't technically know about, yet buying distressed lots. It started with a single quarter-acre parcel in a transitional neighborhood on the east side of Nashville. The lot had been abandoned for years, overgrown, partially contaminated with old construction debris. The price reflected all of that. I used my savings, every dollar I had scraped together from 2 years of working double shifts and skipping vacations, and I bought it. I spent 8 months of evenings and weekends remediating the soil, clearing invasive species, installing a permeable paver pathway, raised native plantings, and a small cedar privacy structure. Then I listed it as a finished buildable lot with a full landscape package. I made a 40% return. I bought a second lot, then a third. I was not rich, but I was building something, quietly and steadily, without anyone in my family knowing. When I was 26, I met a man named David at a regional landscape contractors conference. He was a licensed general contractor, 2 years older than me, with his own small build firm and a calm, methodical intelligence that balanced my more instinctive approach. We started talking shop and didn't stop for about 4 hours. Within 6 months, we were collaborating professionally. Within a year, we were together. Within 2 years, we were planning a business and a life simultaneously. It was David who first suggested I tell my parents what I had been building. They should know, he said one evening. Whatever their issues are, you've done something real. Give them the chance to see it. I wanted to believe that was a reasonable idea. The dinner happened on a Sunday evening in early October. Camille was home for the weekend. The conversation, as always, orbited her. She had been promoted. She was being considered for a mentorship program at her firm. She was looking at buying her first place, and the Nashville market was competitive. I waited through the appetizers and most of the main course. Then I brought up the lots. I explained, briefly and carefully, that I had been acquiring and developing small land parcels on the side, that I had turned a meaningful profit 3 times, and that David and I were considering formalizing the partnership into a standalone company. I mentioned that we were also looking to buy a larger property, and that we were saving aggressively but the market was difficult. I did not ask directly at first. I just wanted them to know. My mother looked curious. In the way she looked curious about things she had already decided were unimportant. My father set down his fork. "How much are you clearing on these lots?" I told him. He nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was running numbers. Then he said, "That's modest. You're not scaling anything, Sophia. You're flipping weeds." I felt the blood drain from my face, but I kept my voice level. I explained the trajectory, the plan, the fundamentals of what we were building toward. Then my mother redirected the conversation to Camille. "Since we're talking about real estate, your father and I have decided to help you with a down payment, sweetheart. The market is no place to start alone." Camille looked briefly uncomfortable. She knew I was sitting right there. The number they named was $95,000. I waited for the second part of the sentence. The part that included me. It did not come. I asked, quietly, if they had considered helping me in any way. Even partially. My father's expression didn't change. "We're not investing in a dead end." He did not raise his voice. He did not seem particularly emotional about it. He said it the way he might say the weather was expected to turn. A simple, factual observation about the state of things. My mother added, softer but no less cutting, "Honey, you've always done things the hard way. That's your choice. But we can't keep throwing support at a path that isn't going anywhere." I left shortly after. David was waiting for me in the car. He could tell by my face. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "We don't need them." He was right, but knowing something is true and feeling it are 2 very different things. And that night, alone in the bathroom of our apartment while he slept, I cried harder than I had cried since my grandfather died. The grief didn't last long. What replaced it was something quieter and more durable than anger. It was clarity. I stopped calling my parents. I stopped showing up for the Sunday dinners that had never really included me anyway. I sent a brief, measured message to my mother explaining that I needed distance and why, and that I would welcome reconnection when they were willing to have an honest conversation. She replied that I was being dramatic. I did not respond. The next 2 years were the most demanding of my life, and the most alive I have ever felt. David and I registered Redfield Land and Design as an LLC 6 weeks after that dinner. The name came from a small red clay ridge on the first large property we had our eye on. a 7-acre parcel 40 minutes southeast of Nashville that had been passed over by developers because of its complicated topography. Steep grades. A seasonal creek that triggered setback requirements. Dense tree cover that the previous owner had let go completely unmanaged. Every one of those complications was, to my eyes, an opportunity. We stretched every financial resource we had and secured the land. I will not pretend it wasn't terrifying. David and I had a combined savings that covered the down payment, with almost nothing left over. We ate at home for months. We drove aging vehicles and deferred every personal expense that was not essential. Our friends occasionally asked if we were okay. We were absolutely okay. We were building. The first year on that property was physical in a way I had not anticipated, even having worked outdoors for years. I was out there most weekends with David and Donna Kessler, who had come out of partial retirement to advise us, and 2 young crew members we had brought on part-time. We cleared invasive honeysuckle and kudzu by hand from the creek corridor. We cut and burned debris piles. We mapped drainage patterns after every rain. I designed the master plan for the property myself, working nights at the kitchen table. The vision was a 6-lot conservation subdivision, a cluster development model that preserved the creek corridor and the upper ridge as permanent green space, while creating 6 residential lots with stunning views and privacy. It was not a common development model for the region, which meant some education of the county planning office was required. I went to 3 zoning meetings in 12 months. I brought site plans, ecological assessments, and a presentation I had built over 40 hours of evenings. They approved it. Donna told me afterward that she had never seen a first-time developer navigate that process so cleanly. "You didn't bulldoze them," she said. "You taught them. That's a skill most people in this industry never learn." David handled the infrastructure contracting, the road grading, the utility connections, the legal subdivision process, while I focused on the land planning and marketing. We brought in a structural engineer for the grading certification and a real estate attorney to structure the lot sales. Every dollar we made we put back into the next phase. When the first 2 lots sold, 18 months after we had purchased the raw land, we cleared more from those 2 sales than my parents had given Camille in total. I did not call to tell them. There was no one to call. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late April when Camille called me for the first time in nearly 2 years. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was strange, strained and high in a way I hadn't heard since we were teenagers. "Sophia, I just drove past a sign on Millbrook Road. Redfield Land and Design. Is that you?" She had been visiting a client who lived near the area. She had taken a wrong turn and ended up on the county road that ran along the edge of our property. She had seen the signage we had installed at the entrance to the development, a cedar-routed sign with the company name and a rendering of the site plan. "Yes," I said. "That's us." A long pause. "Sophia, the lots are beautiful. I can see the creek from the road. There's a finished lot with staging and everything. What is this? How long has this been going on?" I explained, briefly. "The land purchase, the subdivision, the sales so far, the 2 lots still available." Another silence. Then, "Mom needs to see this." She put me on hold. I sat in my truck on the property, engine off, listening to the birds in the creek corridor I had spent 14 months restoring, and waited. When she came back, her voice was softer. "Can I come by? I'd like to actually see it. Not just the road." I said yes. She walked the property that evening with David and me for nearly 2 hours. She was quieter than I had ever seen her. She asked thoughtful questions about the conservation easement, about how we had structured the lot pricing, about what the creek corridor restoration had involved. She crouched down at the water's edge and looked at the native plantings along the bank for a long moment without speaking. "Did you design all of this?" she finally asked. "Every inch." She stood up and looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. Part admiration, part something more complicated. "I told Mom," she said. "She wants to come see it." I felt the familiar knot form in my chest. They came on a Saturday, 3 weeks later. My father wore a pressed button-down even though the property involved walking unpaved paths. My mother brought a hostess gift, a candle, as if this were a dinner party, which told me immediately that she had not fully processed what she was about to see. David walked them through the site with measured, professional calm. He was unfailingly polite. He explained the development model, the ecological approach, the lot configurations. My mother stopped at the overlook point above the creek corridor, a clearing we had deliberately left open at the top of the ridge, and stood very still for a long moment. "This is remarkable," she said, quietly, almost to herself. My father asked several technical questions about the road easement and the HOA structure. These were good questions. The kind of questions that revealed more real estate knowledge than I had expected from him. When David answered them thoroughly, my father nodded slowly, with the look of someone recalibrating an assessment. We ended the tour at the site office, a converted single-wide trailer we had dressed up with cedar siding and window boxes of native plants, which served as our on-site sales office and design studio. I had our full project portfolio displayed on a large monitor. Site plans, ecological assessments, before and after photography, press coverage, a small feature in the Regional Land Trust newsletter, a longer piece in a Nashville business journal that had run 2 months earlier. My mother stood in front of the before and after photographs for a long time. "You did this in 2 years," she said. Not quite a question. 2 years and 3 months, I said. She turned to look at me. Her face was doing something I hadn't seen before. The social composure was still there, but underneath it was something more uncertain. "We didn't know," she said finally. "You didn't ask," I replied, gently. My father spoke from across the room without turning around from the site plan he was studying. "We underestimated you." 4 words, delivered to the wall. Not quite an apology, but from Gerald, it was as close as anything I had heard. I let the silence hold for a moment. "I know you did," I said. "The question is whether that changes." He turned around. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were tired in a way I recognized from the last few years' worth of distance. "We'd like to try," he said. "Your mother and I. If you'll allow it." I looked at David, who gave me nothing but a steady, quiet look that said, "This is yours to decide. Trying will require a real conversation," I said. "Not about the business. About what happened. All of it. From the beginning. I need you to actually hear it, not manage it." My mother nodded. My father held my gaze and nodded once. We scheduled dinner for the following week. That dinner was the hardest conversation I have ever had with another human being. And also the most necessary. I said things I had been carrying for 20 years. Some of it came out imperfectly. My voice broke twice. My mother cried, which I had not anticipated, and which made it harder to stay steady. My father sat through all of it without looking away, which was the most respect he had shown me in my entire life. He did not transform into a different person that night. He did not suddenly become a warm, demonstrative father who understood me intuitively. But he listened. And at the end of the evening, he said, "I was wrong about what success looks like. I think I've been wrong about it for a long time. It was not a resolution. It was a beginning. Those are different things. And I have learned to treat them accordingly." Redfield Land and Design is now in its 4th year. We have completed 2 full subdivision developments and are midway through a third, a 12-lot project on a former horse farm that represents the most complex and beautiful work we have done yet. We employ 7 people full-time. Donna Kessler serves as a formal senior advisor and occasional project lead on ecological restoration components. David manages operations and construction oversight while I drive the land planning, design, and client relationships. We broke ground on our own home last spring, on a corner of the original 7-acre property we had always set aside for ourselves. It is modest by the standards of the lots we sell, but it is ours down to the last stone paver and hand-selected native grass planting. David built the kitchen cabinetry himself over 3 weekends. I designed the rain garden off the back terrace that feeds into a small constructed wetland at the edge of the property. Our daughter, Iris, is 14 months old. She goes to sleep to the sound of the creek. My parents are in her life. It is not uncomplicated. There are still moments when my mother defaults to the old scoring system. Comparing, measuring, assessing. I have learned to name it when it happens, calmly and without drama, and that naming has become a kind of ongoing negotiation that neither of us fully expected but both of us seem willing to continue. Camille and I are closer than we have ever been. She left her investment firm 8 months ago and is completing a graduate certificate in nonprofit financial management. She seems lighter, more like the version of herself that existed before all of us got sorted into roles we never chose. What I know now, that I did not know at 26, is this. The people who tell you that you are a dead end are telling you something about their own imagination, not your actual future. They cannot see past the edge of what they already recognize. That is their limitation, not your ceiling. Build anyway. Build especially then. Because the most astonishing thing about being underestimated is the view from the other side. I'm Sophia. I built this from nothing but dirt, determination, and the kind of stubbornness that people mistake for failure right up until it becomes something they want to take credit for. If any part of this story is yours, I want you to know. The land doesn't care who believed in you. Only that you showed up.